just when I thought the difficult last names in terms of, Levi Onwuzurike in the last video, just when I thought that trend was done, here comes Owa Odighizuwa, defensive tackle out of UCLA here. So, not giving me a break by any means, but we will make it happen regardless. But, no, hopping right into his sort of stats as well as his background, the first thing that I think should be noted is that he is the younger brother to Owa Odighizuwa, who was just drafted back in 2015 by the New York Giants. Obviously, his career didn't quite pan out as we might have hoped, but regardless, I do think it is important that he does sort of have that family pedigree in terms of, just the athletic potential to make the league, right? And make an impact in the league, even though maybe Owa didn't do it to the extent that we might have hoped. I also think that from a statistical production standpoint, I think that one thing that you see is constant, at least in Osa here, is this gradual progression, right? You see him going, okay, 1 sack, 3 sacks, 3.5 sacks, and then finally in that senior season, in only 7 games, 4 sacks. So if you extrapolate that over the course of the year, that would have been easily his best year. The only sort of question with that and sort of caveat to that I might add would be the fact that he was there for 5 years, right? So he's in the same graduating class that I'm in, which would mean, he's 22, 23 years old when he's playing this past fall, right? So how much of that sort of statistical progression is him getting better as a prospect versus how much of it is him just being further along in the maturation process in terms of, he's just stronger, bigger, and faster than all these 18, 19, 20-year-olds that he's facing. Right. I think that is a sort of cause for concern, but, I would much rather have seen him come out and have that dominant senior season than say where he would have been had he just declared after that junior year, if that makes sense. In terms of what I saw on film and sort of why I believe that, I would say right away, one sort of area that he did improve, at least from what I saw going from 2019 to 2020, was in his ability to anchor and just be strong at the point of attack. Initially that grade was pretty substantially lower than it is now, but it just felt like each film that I put on over and over and over, that grade just gradually kept rising, right? Because, the more I watched, the more I realized that, say Mike and I in previous videos, we talked about Marvin Wilson and Christian Barmore. They'd have really good reps against the run, but then they'd also have some really, really ugly reps where they're just getting blown off the ball. Osa, he might not have had great reps on as frequent a basis where he's making these crazy splash plays, but there's also very few plays where he's just getting blown off the ball. More often than not, it's a stalemate. And, when that offensive lineman isn't creating any vertical or horizontal movement, you're essentially clogging a gap, right? And I think that is a strong suit of Osa's game. At least it was at the college level. We'll have to see how that translates to the NFL, but I think that he looked pretty solid and better in that regard than I certainly expected, considering he is only 6'1", 286. As you'll see, that's why I did grade him so low in terms of his size. But I think that sort of smaller frame does do him some favors in terms of as a pass rusher, if that makes sense. I just think that it allows him to be significantly quicker than a lot of these offensive linemen playing on the inside, right? So if you're going to line him up as a 3-tech, which is where I personally think he projects best at the next level, he is just going to win reps as a pass rusher, particularly by beating you off the ball, right? And, he has, I believe, the second highest explosiveness and first step quickness grade to this point out of the 5-6 guys that we've done so far. I thought that as a pass rusher, there is still work to be done, obviously, just in terms of continuing to refine that sort of pass rush tool belt. But one thing I did like was he's always trying to work to an edge. And for those who might not be familiar, obviously, for a guy like Osa facing, let's say, a guard, right? If I'm a 300-plus pound offensive lineman, the toughest path of resistance for Osa to get to the quarterback will be going right through me, right? Because that's where I'm strongest. I can utilize my entire body as leverage against you, right? And when I already have a strength advantage, that's just going to make it even easier. Well, Osa, he does a really good job of using that quickness to continually work from edge to edge, right? So he's working this half and then he's working this half. And, hey, when you cut off that side, he's going to counter back to this side. He does a really good job of that. Whereas some of the other guys in this class sort of just, once you cut off their first sort of move in a sense, or their first step, they're going to wave the white flag on the play. Osa's not that type of guy. He's going to keep fighting. And a lot of times that does result in some really solid reps. One other point that I did want to quickly mention before we get into the big board, though, is actually his motor. As you guys see, I did give him an 8.5 out of 10 on motor. That was one thing that just really impressed me as well, just never quitting on plays. There's one play that stuck out to me that was probably the best play I've seen to this point out of any front seven player. It was just in terms of effort, I'll say. Maybe not the best in terms of some clean sack off the edge, but no. There was a halfback draw against Washington State where they were backed up on like their 8 or 9 yard line, and the play breaks right through the middle, inside of Osa. Wasn't really his fault necessarily, but long story short, running back zigging and zagging downfield. Ultimately, you see him get brought down at the opposing 33-yard line, and guess who it is? It's Osa, who chased him down the entire, 60 yards that it was, 70 yards that it nearly was, all the way downfield. And I just love that out of a 3 technique, right? Whereas, some of these other guys coming up here, in particular, not going to spoil who they are, but they're going to quit on that play by the time the running back hits the 15-yard line. Osa's still running and chasing him down ultimately at the opposite 33. So I just really like that out of him. And I think that really does lead to a lot of that production that we saw. Obviously, those tackle numbers continued to climb year after year after year. And I do think that just sort of that intensity that he plays with does lead him to a lot of those opportunities, if that makes sense. As you can see, with that being said, that does land him third of all the defensive tackles to this point on my big board, just ahead of Levi by half a point, which at that point, it's not very much. The only sort of distinction that I'll make there is I will say Levi is better athletically than Osa, right? And I think that he has a higher ceiling in terms of, if we're just talking straight boom or bust. I think that Levi is a bigger boom candidate than Osa is. But at the same time, I think that Osa is less of a bust candidate in that regard than a guy like Levi is. Not only because of Levi's opt-out, that's a whole nother discussion, but I just think that Osa, what he does in terms of his technique, what he does in terms of his motor, and really what he does with that athletic floor that he has, I just think that he offers you sort of this guaranteed production. And no, maybe he's never going to be a top 5 defensive tackle, a top 10 defensive tackle in the league. But I do think that there's certainly a place for him to be on your team for the next 5-10 years and really make an impact from that 3 technique spot. So, if you guys are UCLA fans, or if your team did, if you're watching this after the draft and your team just drafted Osa, let me know what you thought of the video. Let me know what you think of Osa. Do you think that he should be graded higher? Should he be graded lower? What are your overall thoughts? Drop those down in the comment section below. Otherwise, if you guys do want to see Mike and I, hopefully he'll rejoin me soon. He said he had to go make some moves. Not sure what that means, but he should be joining me for linebackers here coming up in a few days. But no, drop any prospects that you guys would want to potentially see in the comment section down below, and we'll do our best to get to them. But other than that, click that subscribe button, and I think I'm mic'd up, and I'm mic'ing out. Peace, guys.